The mission of the Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund staff recently concluded the Article 4 consultation for 2023 with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia at a time when the kingdom's economy is witnessing a state of great prosperity and rapid growth, with the continuation of reforms within the framework of the Saudi Vision 2030, with the expectation of continued growth in non-oil GDP, despite prevailing global economic challenges, especially geopolitical ones. The kingdom is witnessing an increase in consumer spending and the acceleration of projects implementation, which is enhancing demand. The reform plan launched by the Vision 2030 has led to significant improvement in the regulatory environment and businesses climate and continues to deliver a productive, diversified, and environmentally friendly economy. We are pleased to welcome to have you today in this meeting organized by the Communication and Financial Knowledge Center to talk more about the report of the International Monetary Fund experts on the kingdom's economy and within the framework of the Article 4 consultations for the year 2023 and its connection with the future outlook of the Saudi economy. I welcome you, dear viewers and followers, and I also welcome our guests in this meetings. Mr. Thamer Al-Jarid, Deputy Minister for Macro Fiscal Policy at the Saudi Ministry of Finance, and His Excellency Dr. Fahd Al-Shithri, Deputy Governor of the Saudi Central Bank for Research and International Affairs. And joining us via online is Dr. Amin Mati, Head of the International Monetary Fund Mission to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Welcome again, dear viewers. We start with our first topic in which we will discuss structural reforms in the line with the Saudi Vision 2030 and their impact on achieving comprehensive growth, diversification, and strengthening the Saudi economy. We open this meeting or session with you, Mr. Thamer. I'm very honored to have you with us here today. Thank you for coming. We want to know where the structural reform plan launched by the kingdom's government has reached within the framework of the Saudi Vision 2030, which has led also to significant improvements in the regulatory environment and businesses climate.
First of all, thank you, dear Walid, for having us today. And actually, I would like to welcome my colleague, Dr. Fahd Al-Shithri, and also our colleague, Amin Mati from the IMF staff. Back to your question, actually, I would like to mention that the vision of 2030 is actually long-term vision where it has many phases and milestones in order to achieve our North Star objective. Beginning with the first phase of the vision, which started actually by launching the vision back to 2015, where we have identified our main goals and objective. And then we moved between the time of, to the second phase, between the time of 2016 up to 2020 and 21, where actually I would call it, this is the second phase, where the objective there in that phase actually to ensure connectivity and also enhance the regulatory framework and the business environment, where we actually invested heavily in the digital transformation, and also many strategies and initiatives were taken in place in order to be developed at the stage to be executed at the third phase. The third phase actually where we at right now, which I would call it the execution mode phase, where we started in 2022 executing a lot of strategy and giga project. And as you said in the beginning, that we are accelerating the execution of these strategies and also initiatives. So nowadays we are in the third stage, the execution mode. And I would actually link this topic to, even though with our fiscal planning, for example, as an example of the sequential pattern that we follow in our long-term journey, where we start in the 2016 by the fiscal balance program as the first stage, where the objective actually by that time to mainly focus on reducing the budget deficit from 16 to 15% in 2025, 2015, up to around 2% in 21. And now we are moving with the second phase, which is the fiscal sustainability program, which we actually delinking our fiscal planning from the fluctuation of the oil volatility.
Greatly said, Mr. Thamer. Thank you so much for your answer. Now I turn to you, Dr. Amin. You were the head of the team when the discussion were held in Riyadh during, of course, that time. How did the discussion and mission meeting go, and what happened also regarding the evaluation of the structural reform plan? By the way, also I give you a big welcome again. Happy to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Good to see you, Walid, and Dr. Fahad and Tamer for this discussion and the panel. Look, the discussion during the Article 4 consultation mission means that we meet everybody. So we were on the ground meeting the Ministry of Finance people, central bank, different ministry officials, but also other stakeholders. So private sector, civil society, universities. And the idea was to get a good sense of what was happening in the Saudi economy, look at the past performance, look at the Vision 2030 in terms of implementation, and do a bit of stock taking, but also try to look at the outlook and the challenges and some policy recommendations. Now, on the Vision 2030, and when we talk about the Saudi economy, we found out that, if you do a midway, we are now at the midway stock taking and of the 2030 vision agenda. And if you look at a lot of the targets, they have been surpassed. So if you look at female labor unemployment for female labor force participation, for example, the 30% target that was set for 2030 has already been surpassed. It's already at 37%. And in many of these indicators, you will see strong progress. One of the goal of the Vision 2030 is the diversification of the economy. And we've seen progress here in terms of reliance on oil diminishing in production. We've seen it on non-oil revenue. Non-oil revenue has doubled to 10.4% of GDP, and that's as a result of reforms. There was a lot of reforms that were taken, including new VAT and transformating reforms. And there's a lot of transformative structural reforms that were there to support the economy. And I'm sure we will come back later in the discussion to go into more details.
Greatly said, Doctor. Thank you for your answer. Your Excellency, Dr. Fahd, welcome. Happy and honored to have you with us here today. Dr. Fahd, you played personally a major role also in the Saudi Central Bank in the framework of structural reforms of the banking, also in the financial and enhancing also institutions. What have been the most prominent achievement, you will say, also in this aspect specifically, I would say?
Thank you, Walid, and let me also take this opportunity to welcome my colleague Thamer and Dr. Amin. As you know, the Saudi Central Bank is a strong advocate of maintaining monetary stability and also having a resilient financial system, while at the same time support the financial development in order to support economic growth. I can summarize the achievement of the Saudi Central Bank in two areas. The first area is on the regulatory and supervisory front. And as I mentioned, a strong financial system is important for economic growth. That's why in the Central Bank, we are focused on ensuring the adherence of the financial sector, in particular the banking sector, to international standards, like Basel III reforms, which was finalized recently by the Saudi Central Bank. Also, the adoption of IFRS 9, the adoption of IFRS 17 in the insurance sector, in addition to also IMF and World Bank financial sector assessment program. On the development front, we work diligently in the Saudi Central Bank with the financial sector to create a conducive environment for supporting the innovation, collaboration, and also adoption of financial technologies in different areas, including the digital banking, electronic payments, and payment services providers, in addition to fintech platforms. In 2018, we established what we call it the regulatory sandbox in order to give the opportunity to entrepreneurs to test new services and products, innovative services and products in a very controlled environment. And that led to total number of fintechs that was licensed by the Saudi Central Bank to reach the number of 113 fintech companies. And that's in of itself, I think, a great development in terms of supporting digitalization and innovation in the financial sector. All that being said, we remain focused and vigilant to ensure financial stability and also ensure strong governance in the financial sector and control over the areas of cybersecurity in order to support and retain the confidence in the financial sector.
Greatly said, Doctor. Thank you so much. We go to you, Mr. Thamer. We'd like to ask you also about your assessment as well as a government of the finding of the fund experts, which also acknowledged the reform momentum. Is it still actually continuing, do you think, also?
Thank you, Walid. And actually, I would like to go back to my colleague Amin when he said that the IMF consultation actually goes through a thorough discussion between the IMF staff and also relevant governmental entities and also a private sector to discuss recent development and also to discuss the outlook of this reform and many economic and financial indicator as well. So the IMF staff actually put their outlook based on fact and figure. Having said that, even though the global economy actually facing a lot of challenges in terms of reducing the growth level and also high inflation rate, and still challenges in terms of the supply chain, and with the monetary tightening to combat these events, the Saudi economy actually witnesses a really good growth and sustainable. And actually, we are continuing the journey with the growth in the non-oil, mainly in the non-oil sector, which is actually the government focus. And it could be seen in the Article 4 consultation. If you see the outlook for the Saudi economy, actually will continue the growth, mainly the non-oil sector. The assumption or the expectation in the non-oil activity or the non-oil sector in 2023 by the IMF, it's around 4.9, around 5% this year, and also will continue above the 4% over the medium term. Not only this, actually, even though the inflation, due to proactive measures and policies that the government put in place, also the outlook for the inflation will be maintained around 2% on average over the medium term. And another element actually which shows the diversification, where we look at the balance of payment, for example, where we see in the IMF outlook the trade balance will continue in the surpluses over the medium term. And if you look more in details to the services element, you will see the travel item of that will continue with huge growth over the medium term, which is actually tells you that the momentum of the economic growth is there and also will continue over the medium term and long term, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you, Mr. Thamer. Dr. Amin, I go to you now. As the head of the International Monetary Fund's mission to the kingdom, we wonder also what are the positive signs, you would say, also that the report carried about the Saudi economy, which was also the Saudi economy was classified as the fastest growing economy also among the G20 economics in 2022. What are the positive signs also that you saw in that report?
Thank you very much. And, Tamer alluded to some of that, and you could think about it in a sea of, where the global economy was facing a number of shocks. Saudi Arabia was quite resilient, and actually in 2022, well, the economy was booming. You had the overall growth rate at 8.7%, and that's supported by just the reform momentum, but also higher oil price and production. But as Tamer said, if you were to focus on non-oil economy, that was 4.9%, 5% in 2022. That was driven by both consumer spending strong, but also non-oil real private investment that increased by 45% year on year. So that shows you that the domestic economy has kept on booming, and that contributed to the economy. Wholesale, retail, services sectors have been growing fast, so that's a positive for the economy. Also in line with some of the diversification objectives. Inflation has been contained, less than 3%, now even declining below 2.5%, has been contained, and we've seen housing prices also going down. Fiscal, the situation on the fiscal is that it used to be a deficit. It has turned into a surplus, 2.5 surplus, 2.5% GDP surplus in 2022 for the first time since 2013. And that's driven because you have a strong performance on the revenue front, but also because spending has been contained, and contained more than in the past, where in fact in the past when you have higher oil prices, you had spending that had a more pro-cyclical band. And here, spending has been contained. We haven't seen an increase in the wage bill, for example.
Doctor, how was the spending contained when you say that?
We haven't seen an increase in the wage bill. We've seen some increase on the capital spending. Some of that has been expected. But the pro-cyclicality that we used to see with a huge jump in spending because oil price and production and oil revenues have increased a lot, that we haven't seen. And the budget remained, there's still some deviations from the budget, but not as much as we would have seen in the past. And that is in line with the authorities' effort to delink spending decision from oil price. And, continuing in terms of achievements, you have the external position has also improved for surplus, that 13.5% of GDP surplus from deficit in the past 10 years in terms of performance. Again, here we have exports that are outpacing import, and strong import growth that is linked to the implementation of the giga projects and others. Reserves have remained strong. They haven't accumulated as much as in the past, but that's because you have other institutions, savings that are accumulated through PIF or others, or PIF being the Public Investment Fund. And, if we were to look at this economy, take it in its entirety, you have, look at the other factor. Unemployment has also reached record low at 4.5% total unemployment, 4.5%. You have Saudi unemployment at 8% and below. You have a banking system that's quite resilient. Dr. Fahad talked about some of that performance. You have the solvency ratios that are quite comfortable, non-performing loans that are below 2%, and you need a strong banking sector to really support the economy. And, we also talk, report about all the progress made on the structural reform front, right? If you look at the simplification in terms of the regulatory environment, the cost of doing business has been reduced. Digitalization has improved considerably, and we can talk about that later. And then labor market reforms, including female labor force participation, that has increased. And actually, our analysis has shown that if that continues to increase, let's say go to emerging market level, then that could bring increased growth by another 1.5%. And all of these, if was done because of, you had higher oil price that was favorable for Saudi Arabia, but mostly I want to emphasize the implementation of the reform and the Vision 2030 reform agenda that was on many fronts. And our recommendation that you will see throughout the report is that reform implementation should continue irrespective of what happens with the oil price. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Fahad, I move to you now. I want to ask you also, what are the conclusions that you think also that reach by the staff about the effective role played by activating the role of financing and banking institution and money market in making the Saudi economy assume the rank that it is?
Thank you, Waleed. I can summarize the role of the financial sector in general, banks, finance companies, insurance companies as well, into three main areas to support the economic growth. And this is also indicated in the IMF staff report. The first area, which is enhance the access, in which the financial institutions facilitated the greater access to different finance and insurance products for businesses and individuals. That in turn contributed to support economic activities and investment in the economy, and as a result impacted the overall growth of the economy. The second point, enhanced financial stability, as we highlighted at the first question, and also as highlighted by Dr. Amin, which is important for economic growth. The IMF report highlighted that the role of the banks, finance companies, insurance companies, along with the role played by regulatory and supervisory activities of the central bank, contributed to maintain financial stability. In turn, maintaining financial stability is important for enhancing confidence in the economy. Enhancing the confidence of the economy is supporting the economic activities and supporting investment and attraction of domestic and foreign investment to the kingdom, and as a result supporting economic growth. The third point, which is the contribution of the financial institutions to support the government's effort in order to diversify the economy. And I will give an example of three sectors that experienced a tremendous growth since 2018: the mortgage sector, the SME sector, and the fintech sector, which I highlighted at the first question.
True.
So the mortgage sector, in 2018, lending from banks to the mortgage sector was only 238 billion Saudi riyals. In the first quarter of 2023, it reached 731 billion riyal, which is, I think, more than 3 times doubled, which is a significant, I think, increase to support the housing, and which is one pillar of the Vision 2030. And also the SME sector, the lending from the banks to the SME sector increased from 100 billion in 2018 to reach 235 in the first quarter of 2023. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the fintech sector, in 2018, we started with the regulatory sandbox.
Sure.
There were zero number of fintech companies.
Yes.
We reach now 113 companies. So in all of these three areas, I think there were a contribution by the financial sector to support the economic growth.
Really said. Also, that clarifies why the kingdom as well also is at the rank it is at the moment. Mr. Thamer, I move to you now. The Saudi Vision 2030 realization program had an important role, I would say, also in the achievements that we are seeing at the moment. We would love for you also to kindly shed more lights on the fund staff reports that mentioned the roles as well also of these programs.
First of all, really, in this topic particular, I think we could spend the whole evening, to speak about it. But however,
I wouldn't
I'll
blame
try-
you if you did.
Yeah. But however, I will try to be brief here by picking exactly like direct example from the article for staff report, and also my colleague Amin might also elaborate more on this. let me go back to my first question when I say one of the most important element for the vision, connectivity. So the vision realization program do not really work in a solo mode. They are connecting, they are complementing each other. And so that's why we have different program. We have around 10 and 11 program. We have also other strategies to complement program in order to achieve our North Star the vision objective by 23. One straightforward example, the housing sector. The housing program, actually. The house ownership increase was really noticeable. And our target, our first phase stage target was...
Can I ask you something, Mr. Thamer? Why is it significant that the house ownership to be important also and all the stabilizing of the economy? Why is that part specifically important?
Well, I'll tell you why is that, because I mean, it's very important, I mean, to have the connectivity between sectors and program. So the housing program will not really work alone, will not really be able to achieve this goal without the support from the financial sector, for example. Mainly the financial sector development program, actually, which facilitate and enable many initiative and financial instrument to the housing program. And actually, the housing program, one of the pillar for the vision, actually, to help the society and also increase the living standard for the Saudis. So
Yes.
it is one example in the financial, the
One of
combination
many,
between the financial and the housing sector. And also, if there is an extra example, the digital transformation that comes under the National Transformation Program that really enable many sector and many activities for both, for the public sector and also the private sector benefiting from that in order to ease of doing business. You see a lot of now a lot of platforms that you don't need to commute to finish an engagement with governmental entities. You can do it now with a lot of apps and other platforms such as Abshir and other stuff. I'll pause here. As I said, this is a really long and interesting topic, but
Yes,
let me
indeed.
pause here.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Thamer, for the answer. I move to you now, Dr. Amin. To conclude the topic we're speaking about also at the moment, I want to ask you about the expected effects that you referred to also in the report at the local, regional, and international levels for the accelerations of the growth of the Saudi economy.
Thank you. I mean, the growth of the Saudi economy will have quite important spillovers. You see it, for example, in neighboring countries where you get remittances that are increasing. Where a lot of workers are working in Saudi Arabia. The expatriate number of workers have now increased and increased above 7 million, which means that it's above the pre-2019 pre-COVID level. And now with the Saudi economy booming, you have more remittances going to neighboring countries, which is also contributing positively to those economies. The Saudi authorities are also contributing to help some more vulnerable countries. There's $28 billion in financial support that has been provided since October 2021. There's also, we are in a world where there's a lot of spillovers from various events. The Fed tightening will have an impact on many economies. For Saudi Arabia, we saw that the impact is mostly limited. And why would that be limited? Because of the large preponderance of deposits that are non-remunerated, which means that the banks, the net interest margin of banks will be positive even with the Fed tightening. And we've actually seen lending that is continuing there. And we've also seen that the in terms of exposure, in terms of the investment abroad, investment into US Treasury bills has decreased. And therefore, there's less exposure to what has happened in terms of mark to market or asset valuation that we have seen in some other countries. So overall, I would say that the spillovers from higher Saudi growth are positive for the rest of the world.
Dr. Fat, we want to know also, or want you as well to talk about the positive results that indicated also in the report regarding the importance of the monetary policy in advancing economic growth and the effective regularity and supervisory framework that was carried out by the Saudi Central Bank.
Thank you, Walid. The monetary policy framework of the Saudi Central Bank have proved over time its effectiveness in maintaining monetary stability, which is, I think, one of the main objectives of the Saudi Central Bank, and is important for supporting economic growth. And also, it helped to shield the Saudi economy from different external shocks. This was evident during different crises that happened globally, including the Asian crisis of the 1990s, the global financial crisis in 2008, and also more recently the COVID-19 pandemic.
True.
The current domestic monetary conditions are very strong and also continue support the economic growth and economic activities. This is demonstrated by the growth of the money supply by 9.3% in July, in addition also to the strong credit growth of 10.5% in July as well. SAMA is able to utilize different monetary tools in order to maintain monetary stabilities, like the monetary open market operations, and will continue also to ensure that it acts when it's necessarily to support monetary stability. On the banking front, I think we discussed it previously, and the IMF report indicated, and also Dr. Amin indicated, the resiliency and the strength of the financial sector. Our role in SAMA to ensure that we adopt prudent approach to regulation and supervision in order to maintain financial resilience of the financial system.
Very well said. Thank you, Dr. Fahad. I move to you now, Mr. Thamer. What are the most prominent, do you think, also, I would say, comments of international staff about the role played by the flexibility of the financial sector and the strengthening of governments in the economic growth, to be exact?
And this element, I think one of the most important element actually, it's coordination, proper coordination and governance between monetary policy and the fiscal policy. And actually this is happening, in the past, and also will continue over medium and long term. Because these actually two policies, actually they work hand in hand in order actually to promote the growth for the country, and mainly the non-oil sector. I give you like a couple examples of kind of coordination that we do between the monetary and the fiscal. For example, at the financial development sector program, and also the financial stability committee, where actually we monitor the progress, the recent development in the financial sector, and also put the right measures in a place in order to mitigate any external risk, for example, or internal risk as well. So the most important element here is about governance and the proper coordination. And as I said, this is actually happening right now and will continue to be happening in the future.
Greatly said. Thank you, Mr. Thamer. Dr. Amin, I want to ask you also, what positive signs did you find during your discussion with the expansion of digital transformation, flexible financial policies, strengthening also the monetary policies, and the role in promoting economic growth in Saudi Arabia?
Thank you very much, Walid. There's been tremendous progress on digitalization. The transformation has been seen in many aspects, from the government to the financial sector. Dr. Fahad talked about the number of fintech And we've seen financial inclusion that is improving as a result of that. We've seen government effectiveness, and we've done analysis actually in terms of digital transformation, in terms of the contribution of the digital economy to overall economy. You know, in 2015 it was about 11%. Today we're close to 15%. And that's expected to continue. If you look at the resilience of the Saudi economy during COVID, if you were to look at, if you had the previous level of digitalization and this level of digitalization, you clearly see that the Saudi economy has been more resilient because it is more digitalized. And I think all the progress in those areas go in the right direction. Obviously, for that, you need to have the right macroeconomic environment, which is and the right macroeconomic policies supported by a strong financial sector. On monetary policy, it is geared towards supporting the exchange rate peg. So there has been a tightening in line with that. As Saudi Central Bank has shown that it's managing liquidity in coordination with Ministry of Finance when you have some big bumps. Liquidity management through open market operations is important. In terms of financial sector policies, I'm not going to belabor the point in terms of how resilient the sector was, but you know, the fact that it's supported by a very strong regulatory environment. Dr. Fahad talked about IFRS 9 implementation. Also in January, we had Basel III reform implementation in terms of risk. You still have some risk-based supervision framework. All of those are there to ensure that the banking sector remains strong. We have private sector credit growth that's in double digit. It's slower than what it was, but it is still above 10%, so that is quite robust. And all of that shows that the economy and the lending in the economy has continued, even though one could see that interest rate has increased. And when you asked about flexibility and flexible financial sector policies,
Yes.
and then I talked about regulatory environment. I'll give you an example of something that we would have seen in the Saudi economy during COVID, right? We had some loans that were restructured to help some businesses that were facing some one-time shock. The concern at that time, including raised by some at the IMF, were that restructured loans could become non-performing and would be a risk for the banking system. But the loan classification, the regulatory environment has stayed. And today, 2 years past COVID, we are seeing that some of those companies or sectors have recovered, and we have non-performing loans that remain below 2%. So that's an example of flexible financial policy that did help promote economic growth. And I'll reiterate the message that we have in our report about the need to maintain vigilance. There's a lot of risks out there, and particularly if you have too strong credit growth in one sector, mortgage sector, to make sure that the risks are adequately monitored to avoid having a problem down the road.
Thank you, Dr. Amin. Appreciate your answer. That clarifies also a lot of the points that was mentioned in the question. To conclude this topic, Dr. Fahad, I'm gonna go to you. We hope also that you will shed more light as well also on the observations and finding of the fund staff and the recommendation regarding the continued expansions of financial technology here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Well, I think Dr. Amin highlighted some of these issues with regard to digitalization and the importance of digitalization in the economy in general, but also in the financial sector. And the IMF report have praised the Kingdom's effort in that area, highlighting that the fintech sector experienced tremendous growth of almost 79% in terms of the number of fintech companies, which I highlighted at the beginning. And that led to support financial inclusion, and financial sector penetrations, which reached 94% in 2022, compared to only 72% in I think
92%. That's
94% financial penetration of financial services in 2022. And we also one important point that and achievement that I want to highlight, which is related to the increase in the digitalization of the financial sector, which is the number of the percentage of the non-cash transactions. In 2017, at the beginning of the financial sector development program, it was only 16%. And in 2022, it's reached 62%, which is, I think, tremendous growth compared to any other country. That was the result of investment in digitalization, either in the infrastructure or in the regulation. So that's, I think, an important achievement in that regard. In SAMA, and since the establishment of the regulatory sandbox in 2018, we've been also working on updating regulations, current regulations, or issuing new regulations in order to accommodate new concepts and new innovation in the financial sector. I give an example for the buy now, pay later regulations, which is a new area that entered the financial sector, and now it's expanding. Also, we issued the rules for debt-based crowdfunding, in addition to other rules that support the new concepts of the financial technology.
Briefly said. Appreciate your answer, Dr. Fahad. With that said, dear viewers, we're going to be taking a short break, and then we're going to be right back to continue our discussion. So please stay tuned. Welcome back, dear viewers and followers. We continue our topic and discussion with our esteemed guests here today. I move on to you now, Mr. Thamer. I would like to ask you also about the mechanism and governance that the government has put in place to implement the 2023 recommendations.
Thank you, Walid. Actually, for usually, every single year that we have the engagement with the IMF staff during the Article 4 consultation, by the end of the mission and also sharing the report and the findings of the IMF experts, we look into the whole recommendation that actually provided to the Saudi authority. And we actually, this recommendation, it's not mandatory for Saudi Arabia. I think there are some of the recommendation actually in line with the Saudi context that we look into and we take it in consideration. And usually IMF recommendation actually comes under that line item, where after we look into, as I said, to this all recommendation, and we assign a task force to discuss them with relevant entities, and we see what is really valid to them, and actually we could implement and actually in line with the Saudi context. So we move toward executing these recommendations.
Greatly said, Mr. Thamer. Appreciate your answer. I move to you now, Dr. Amin. Dr. Amin, I ask you, what are your observations also about the course and the mechanism of implementing the recommendations of the staff, and do you assess as well also the follow-up of the implementation of the recommendations of the staff within the framework of the Article 4 consultations?
Thank you
Long
very
question.
much. Let me phrase that, first of all, this is an ongoing consultation process. We have close relations with the Saudi authorities, and we are, providing policy advice in many areas. And in some areas where the Saudi authorities are asking for more in-depth technical advice, we also provide technical assistance. On the Article 4 recommendations per se, in many areas, we see progress. And you see in our report, we have a table where we actually report on what was taken from our previous year advice. And that was quite positive. We've seen that on the fiscal policy side. We've seen that on the structural fiscal reforms, whether it is the medium-term fiscal framework, the Treasury single account, on the budget preparation. All of those are in line with some of our advice. Some of the reforms on the financial sector reform front are also in line with international standards, and also in line, when I talked about Basel III reform implementation or IFRS 9, etc., that is also in line with our advice, the progress on structural reforms. We had recommended fiscal sustainability, fiscal discipline in light of higher oil price. We now have surplus that's in fiscal. So all of these go in the right direction. There are some areas where there's progress. We'd like to see more. For example, on the sovereign asset liability management framework, this was a long-standing recommendation where there's been progress, but we'd like to see more. And I think that's an ongoing dialogue on many of these fronts. And this is an evaluation today that is a continuation of a big reform agenda that is continuing, right? I mean, reforms, you don't make them just in 1 year. But in each year, you also have to adapt to different shocks that you are receiving. And so this policy advice will also differ in light of the different shocks, and that the world economy or the Saudi economy would be facing.
Thank you, Dr. Amin. Dr. Fahad, I come to you. I want to ask you also about the recommendation of the staff regarding the central bank and the banking sector, and the extent also to which you benefit from them. The mechanism for the further implantation, if I would say.
Thank you. I think this is a very important question. The Article 4 consultation is not only the report, but it's the process, I think, which we appreciate and appreciate the interaction with the IMF staff during the mission, and also during after the mission, either different engagement or through a technical assistance. We welcome the recommendations by staff in this report. Especially it comes at a time, as Dr. Amin highlighted, with strong credit growth in the kingdom that is in the area of corporate and mortgage sector. Maybe I'll highlight some of the points raised by staff in this area, in particular for the banking sector. The IMF staff highlighted that the banking system remain in a solid footing with the strong capital adequacy ratio, with high profitability, and with non-performing loans are at a low level and also on a declining trend. Also, it highlighted that the monetary tightening impact on the banking sector is muted, And also, despite the mortgage boom, still the risks to the banking sector from the housing sector remains low. Final point, I think the IMF report highlight that the strong bank performance was underpinned by the efforts by the Saudi Central Bank to modernize its regulatory environment, regulatory and supervisory framework, and in particular, as Dr. Amin highlighted, the implementation of the financial sector assessment program recommendations, in particular the rollout of the risk-based supervision and the adoption of the IFRS 9 requirements by all banks.
Thank you, Dr. Fahad. Appreciate you. I move on to you now, Mr. Thamer, to conclude this topic. I want to ask you also, what are the recommendations of the fund staff that have been implemented and serve to support the macro fiscal policies of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia?
First of all, in this element, I would like to mention that the IMF actually has many experts from different background, and also they regularly engage with Saudi Arabia in Article 4 consultation and other platform, as mentioned by my colleague Amin and also Dr. Fahad. Also, Dr. Amin mentioned a couple of the recommendation and also the endorsement from the IMF staff of what we have achieved so far in the fiscal side, in fiscal transparency, for example, in the SALM, in the asset and liability management framework, and also enhance budget execution and so on. So all of these recommendation and endorsement actually come from the IMF, which is actually implemented in a place right now.
True. Appreciate you a lot. Thanks. Thank you so much, Mr. Thamer. I'm gonna begin with you on our final topic. I want to ask you also, through the discussion of Article 4 within the relevant authorities in the kingdom, and your follow-up also to the annual recommendations and the progress that has taken place in reality. What is your vision for the course of the Saudi economy for the next 5 years? To also generalize the question, let me ask you, what is your vision for the Saudi economy for the next 5 years? Straight up.
Thank you very much. Economic prospects are positive. Over a 5-year term, we're expecting non-oil growth to be above 4%. For 2023, we expect non-oil growth momentum to remain strong at 4.9%. This is the same as last year, with domestic demand remaining strong, giga project implementation, the reform momentum. We actually talked in the report about domestic demand overheat in case there's too much pressure on some of the goods, given some of the rapid growth that we expect and some of the increased execution of project implementation. So far, that has not materialized. We expect that inflation has stayed contained, and we expect that in our baseline to continue going towards 2% in terms of inflation over the medium term. But what I want to emphasize here, I talked about non-oil growth because a lot of people are going to focus on overall growth. And overall growth depends a lot on what's happening on oil production, etc. We're going to find that 2023 overall growth is about 2%. So that's going to be quite a big decrease from the 8.7% of 2022. And as oil, if there's additional oil production cuts, we're going to have that number going down. But what's important and what we're finding out is that non-oil growth momentum remains strong. And actually, we've done some no-casting analysis looking at what's happening, Q2, Q3, Q4. And we've seen some of non-oil economic activities remaining above 5%, which is quite a strong, robust economy growing. I mean, if there's a message from the medium term is that there's a lot of reforms happening. There's a lot of right reforms that are being implemented, including to diversify the economy, and that these should continue irrespective of what's happening in the oil price.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Dr. Amin, for your answer. Mr. Thamer, with your follow-up also to the kingdom's economy, since the launch of the National Transformation Program, also which is in accordance with the Saudi Vision 2030, I want to ask you also as well about what are your positive future expectation for the economy in general?
Maybe Dr. Amin actually covered some of the ideas relevant to this topic in terms of perspective, but let me share with you some insight as well. As we see the vision realization program actually starting to yielding tangible results so far, and we actually expecting to the momentum will continue over the medium and long term. The objective actually to have a diversified economy. So our objective to focus in the non-oil GDP aspect. In 2022, we ended up the year by 8.7 of growth, and also the total GDP actually surpassed $1 trillion for the first time. And we see the first half of this year, actually, the non-oil activities actually increased by 5.4 so far, and actually we are expecting over the medium term the non-oil activities to be on average around 6%. What derives this actually? Mainly two elements. Consumption aspect due to a lot of initiative and program enabling that aspect in terms of tourism, in terms of entertainment, in terms of actually investing in more sector, and also the other part actually, which is the investment element, where we see NIDLIP program, for example, and also another initiative that being put place by the government, actually enhancing the investment Sharik program, for example, made in Saudi, for example. And you will see nowadays actually, for example, I'll give you number of factors in Saudi Arabia increase within 5 to 6 years by 46%, from around 7,000 factory and now exceeded 10,500 by the end of 2022. This will not happen actually without the reform, without the initiative that's been taken place on the vision realization program, and some of the initiative and the target actually surpassed 2023. For example, when it comes to female participation, we are now around 36, 37 compared to 23, compared to 30% in 2023 aspect. Unemployment rate actually dropped significantly to around 8.5 by the end of the first quarter of this year, and this is actually bring us close to the target of 2023, which is around 7% for Saudi unemployment rate.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Fahd. Mr. Thamer, appreciate your answer. I move to you now, Dr. Fahd. I would like to ask you also about your positive expectations for the economy as well, but with regard to the monetary policy, liquidity also in the banking sector, and the technical transformation.
Just to follow up on what Dr. Amin mentioned and Thamer mentioned regarding the overall growth versus the non-oil growth, which I totally agree with both of them, that the focus should be on the non-oil growth. And for example, the General Statistics Authority's figures indicate that the overall growth for the first quarter of the Saudi economy is 3.9%, and for the second quarter, 1.1%. And if you take this as a value, it could indicate that there is a drag on the economy. But if you look at the non-oil activities and the non-oil growth, we will see that the first quarter was 5.4%, the second quarter 5.5%, which remain resilient in terms of growth.
True.
Which is a reflection of the implementation of many reforms of the Vision 2030, and also the continuous momentum in the economy, indicated by many other factors like the Purchasing Manager Index, the non-oil PMI, which indicated a growth of 59% for the first quarter, and also for the 6 months until of the 2023. In addition to the point of sales transactions increased in the second quarter by 11%, and in addition to the bank credit, which increased by more than 10%, 10.5% in July. All of these are indicators of the economic activities and the positive momentum in the economy, which we expect to continue for the rest of the 2023. On the role of the monetary policy, as I mentioned at the beginning, monetary policy will ensure monetary stability, which is supportive and conducive for economic growth. And that's the focus of the Saudi Central Bank in order to support economic growth. This is also goes for the banking sector, for the financial sector as a whole. We will focus on being prudent while ensuring that the financial sector is playing its role in supporting the economic growth going forward. In terms of the liquidity in the financial sectors, two important indicators that indicate very strong position in terms of liquidity, which is the LCR, liquidity coverage ratio, which is an indicator of the liquidity over the short term. It's reached 187%, well above the Basel requirement of 100%. In addition to the net stable funding ratio, which is an indicator of the liquidity over the medium term, it reached 116% compared to Basel requirement, which is 100%. This all indicate that the banking sector remain liquid and will continue to be supportive of the economic growth going forward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fahd. Before I conclude our discussion today, I want to ask you, Mr. Thamer, how do you see the positive also economic platform in terms of facilitating achievement opportunities, strengthening also the role of the private sector, supporting small and medium enterprises, also major projects, and the trends also that is currently going towards the green economy?
I think the gist of the Vision 2030 about diversification. And diversification will come through many platforms, through government intervention by having the proper regulatory framework and assure connectivity. And also the public sector actually leverages on two, I would call it the wings, the PIF, the Private Investment Fund, and also the National Development Funds. So these actually the two wings that the government actually use and leverage in terms of enhancing mainly the investment. One of the objective actually at the Vision 2023 is actually to increase the participation of the private sector to contribute from the total GDP to reach around 65% over in 2023. So the focus actually on the private sector participation. PIF will invest, announce its strategy, and will invest in many sectors that will tap with them, will tap to new sectors that will bring with them during that journey new investment through the private sector. And in the meantime, the National Development Funds will facilitate and bring financial tools to the private sector in order them to provide them with the financial support that it needs, and also the central banks through different initiatives, for example, at the financial sector development program, which actually bring the right capital and the right amount to the private sector actually to have it room to grow. As a result of that, I think so far we see the private investments actually increase heavily at total of GDP share. It was in the private investment was in 2016 before the beginning of the vision was around, they contribute around 15.8 from the total GDP, and nowadays we see it's around 24-25%. So this is a really dramatic change we are seeing in the structure of the economy, and yet to come. And also we have, in terms of regulatory framework, we have, for example, in terms of SMEs, number of SMEs actually increased from around 1 million to, in 2016, nowadays around 1.2 hundred something. So this increase will not happen without the regulatory framework. And for example, the SMEs authority that actually helping that sector actually to grow more in the economy. And when it comes actually to the green initiative, as you may know, that the government actually has one of the initiative actually to reduce the emission and comes to net zero emission by 2060, and the green initiative actually part of the vision 2023 aspect. And also there are other programs and initiatives toward the green economy, such actually the energy mix, where we plan to have more than of our electricity in Saudi Arabia, 50% of it actually comes from renewable energy. So all of these efforts actually yielding to the green economy aspect as well.
Appreciate you so much, Mr. Thamer. It was a great pleasure to be with you all. It was a very definitely educational also, and we learned a lot about the Saudi economy, why the kingdom economy is also stable, also and rapidly developing and evolving as well, the stability of its economy, and as we can see also under this great vision 2030 also, which is led by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Again, I appreciate you all. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I want to also thank you, dear viewers, for watching us, wishing that you were able to also benefit and get knowledge also as well more about the kingdom's economy and why it is what it is as we see. Thank you for watching and have a great positive day.